Anybody? And I can't find the mate to it. I'm sure there were two. I got up, with an uneasy feeling that she had not told me all she knew. Very well, I said. I'll burn it. I'll have to do it at night in the furnace. She nodded, and then leaned forward and put a hand on my arm. I can only say this, Louisa, she said in a low voice. I believe that glove was deliberately planted where I found it, and that it was the most cruel and diabolical thing I have ever known. Chapter 12. Before I left, I inquired about Emily, and she gave me a quick hard glance. She's all right, she said. Dr. Armstrong gave her a hypodermic last night, but I don't think she slept much. It only dazed her. Emily was not asleep. As I went out, I heard her voice in the upper hall querulously demanding some paste, and Peggy replying that there was none in the house. I'll get you some, Miss Emily, I called. She did not hear me, however, and so I started up the stairs. The men were still in the library at that time, and I recognized the voice of Mr. Lewis, who has been the attorney for most of the Crescent ever since I can remember. As I mounted, I could hear Emily's canary, singing gaily, and in the upper hall Peggy was using a carpet sweeper. It might have been any house in the Crescent on a sunny August morning, had it not been for a policeman in uniform, eyeing Peggy with admiration from his position outside Mrs. Lancaster's bedroom door. Where is Miss Emily, Peggy? I asked. She glanced at the other. She's in there, miss. There was a leak in the night, and they let her go in. I saw then that the door into the death chamber was open, and I went to it and glanced in. The big bed had been stripped of its sheets and mattress, but apparently nothing else had been touched, except that the chest had been drawn out from under the bed and now rested on two chairs in the center of the room. The leak was at once evident. The rain had seemingly come in from the third floor by the way of the roof, for the heavy paper was soaked and loose from ceiling to floor just beside the big bed. There was a pan on the floor to catch the water, and stretching over this Emily Lancaster was carefully patting the paper back into place. She had not heard me, for she did not turn until I spoke to the policeman. May I go in? No, miss. Sorry, but it's orders. Then Emily turned, and I was horrified by the change in her. Her face was simply rattled. Not only that, usually the perfection of neatness, she looked as though she had slept in her clothes. She still wore yesterday afternoon's white dress, but it was incredibly wrinkled. When she came toward me, she moved with the tottering gait of a very old woman. "I'm afraid the paper is spoiled," she said, as though that was the most vital matter in the world. "I've spoken to Father ever since Ellen reported the leak upstairs, and now it has come all the way through." She held out her hand to me, seemed to forget why, and turned back to look again at the paper. "Even when it dries it will leave a stain," she said. "It did it once before, but not so much. I fastened it back with thumbtacks, but now I'd like to glue it." It was rather dreadful, that escape of hers from reality to anything so unimportant. And she would not stop. She sent me down to Margaret to see if she had any paste, and Margaret gave it to me grimly. "Still at it, is she?" "She's been carrying on about it since 7 this morning. I suppose it gives her something to do." "There's plenty to do, if she'd pull herself together." "Tell her not to use that paste while the paper's wet, and get her to bed if you can, Louisa." I did not manage all that, but I did coax her to bathe and lie down. She kept up an incessant rattle of empty talk all the time I was with her, and what with that and the singing of the bird I felt as though I were on the edge of hysteria myself. It was fortunate for my nerves that Dr. Armstrong came in just then, and seemed to grasp the situation without words from me. "Now see here, Emily," he said sternly. "You stop talking and take this medicine. I told you to take it last night. After that Louisa here will draw your shades and settle you. And get rid of that damned bird, Lou." "I'm used to him," Emily protested. "I could get used to a riveting machine," the doctor retorted, "but I don't intend to."